everybody, welcome back. I hope you had a good coffee break, a nice chance to chat and discuss and share ideas. We're now shifting gear and content a little bit because we have our keynote speech, and I'm going to be inviting up on stage Michela Magash, who's an innovation catalyst who bridges science, art, design and technology. She's an innovation advisor to the European Commission and the G7 leaders, and a former winner of the European Woman Innovator of the Year award in 2017, the first time that that award was given to someone from the culture and creative industry. So come on up, Michela, let's hear from you.
Hello everyone, it's a great pleasure to be here. I've worked with EIT colleagues for many years on innovation recommendations on special initiatives such as the AOTI, and I find the EIT has a particularly important role at this moment. We have the Horizon Europe program in research on one end, and we have the EIC, the European Innovation Council, which is very much about investment, philanthropy, scaling up. And I find that EIT has a key role in the center as technology transfer vehicle, and particularly in the generation of intellectual property. And I find that the culture and creative industries are particularly well placed to facilitate that across all of the different areas of EIT. I run a community of over 7,000 global innovators, ranging from anything from New Zealand to Alaska, all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of areas of expertise. I've been running that for 7 years now. And in his last month of presidency, President Obama was asked to guest edit Wired US, and we were very honored and very lucky to be chosen as one of the future technology frontiers with our champion Victoria Modesta, whom you see here behind me. When our community grew to over 5,000, I felt we needed a role model, and it had to be a woman. It had to be someone who was courageous, who was forward-thinking, and not afraid to challenge preconceptions, both in terms of culture and in terms of technology. And Victoria is now fellow of MIT, and she's a major global star. But when she joined our community in our labs, our artists and scientists were instructed not to think of her as someone that needed to become, so to speak, normal. We do not recognize that term. It was about creating her enabling her with new kinds of technologies, creating as many extensions of her as possible to make her someone we can all aspire to. So the first thing, of course, they fitted her with sensors, with a carbon fiber dress, and playfully created a prosthetic leg that could generate smoke for the stage. And why not? In this case, you see her reproducing the Marilyn Monroe image in a very new kind of way. But some breakthroughs happened when we fitted her with neurofeedback sensors, and when she started to train to control the lights on her dress directly from her brain. And it took her a few days in our labs to be able to do that, but in the end, she was able to express herself seamlessly. And this was something that pointed to a new dimension to working with data-driven systems. It wasn't just the fact of collecting data from the user. There was actually an additional element of upskilling, of training to discover new kinds of capabilities and modes of expression. So we wanted to take that further. We were invited by Slush to be in residence. Slush is the biggest convention of startups and investors in Europe. Most of you will know about it, about 20,000 people. For a week we did labs with 30 scientists and artists, and a wonderful blind singer at the center from the Sibelius Institute. She's a vocal coach, highly accomplished, called Rika Hänninen. And the first thing we said to her was, Rika, what do you need? What are you missing when you perform? And she said, well, I don't know how the audience is feeling. I can't see them. So sometimes it's a case of applying a very simple technology in a completely new case scenario, and suddenly we have a huge impact. And in this case, we fitted the audience with pulse sensors. And this was the audience of VIP investors in Slush, and we thought they wouldn't be interested, but there was a rush for the stage, and it was a rock and roll moment. Everybody wanted to transmit their pulse to Rika so they could establish contact and a dialogue with her on stage. So sometimes things can be very simple but very creative applications. However, this was some of the members of the audience on stage. But the real breakthrough moment happened when we continued our investigation with neurofeedback. And in this case, the neurofeedback team adapted a system that's used in clinical trials for people with anxiety attacks, which allows them to monitor their brain activity, and when the pattern changes, they can start to train to control it. But in this case, the system was adapted to play the musical scale. So members of the lab could start to train to play music directly from their brain. And it was taking them about 2 hours to be able to go up and down the musical scale, which is already quite remarkable if you think how long it takes you to train to play piano, which requires some other type of training. But the thing that was really remarkable was when Rika put it on, and she was able to play instantly. And then, of course, it appeared that someone who in the old mechanical era was considered less able-bodied was now, in the era of brain-computer interfaces and data-driven systems, far more talented than the rest of us. So where does all this come from? This is Rika's brain pattern being visualized for the benefit of the audience. My background is in design futures for large corporates, Apple, Nike, Nokia. I wrote a system for flicking through images when all of Europe south of Paris was on 56K modems, including Budapest. And I got headhunted by Apple, and it became the precursor to CoverFlow. And of course, you have on all your phones now a system that does that. Half of my company ended up on the design of the first iPhone. They're still there. They're one of the biggest contributors to the Apple innovation and patenting ecosystem. And this is just to emphasize how much the cultural creative industries, and particularly in this case design, contributes to the success of major corporations. But it's not just that. Slush asked me to do a keynote about what's important about music. And of course, aside from us using music as a social glue and it being one of the most fluid and most understood languages in culture, I actually pulled up the snapshot of Nasdaq at that moment, and I said, well, here are the corporations that are using music and culture as a driver of business and of innovation, and they are some of the largest ones in the world. Some of the other indicators, in 2017, it was already apparent that one of the largest gaming companies in the world, King in Sweden, was twice as big as Volvo. Some of the other indicators are, for instance, when we have great infrastructure, such as the fastest broadband in the Western world, which we have in Northern Europe, and I would like to see it happen everywhere in Europe, we can service industries such as Hollywood. And also industry simulators and remote operation interfaces, of course, that are essential for industry automation would not exist without the CCI. Now, future skills. This is a girl in our labs. I'm fortunate to have people from the age of 3 to 83 in our community. And this is a little girl being turned into an engineer over 3 hours. Whereas previously she wasn't interested in digital, she wasn't interested in computers, and then her parents come and run to us and say, how did you do this? And this is through creative engagement. It is absolutely essential for education. So contributing to future skills, one particular thing that we have observed is upskilling of existing workforce. It's seamless. When we have professionals involved in our labs, they engage over a mission or a goal or they have an ambition. They will learn whatever they need to learn in order to achieve that. We also discover constantly new use cases for work, develop new cultures of work, new cultures around data-driven systems, and of course all of the ethical dimensions that are necessary in large corporations. The CCI really contribute to. You can see how many women are in our labs. There are some students from MIT here. MIT made a documentary about our labs. And this lady who's sitting at the computer just happens to be the first and the youngest ever winner of the Hungarian National Video Awards, who's part of our community and currently on a postgrad in New York. These are our statistics. These are collected over a period of 3 years, and there's unequivocal proof that creativity contributes to much greater diversity, and particularly in this case, female participation. But 33% was not good enough for us, so we actually went on a mission to put female role models in charge of all technology areas. So last year in our big event in Stockholm, over 800 people prototyping in real time. We had world-famous professors of AI and robotics. We had world-famous artists such as Imogen Heap in charge of blockchain, people from senior researchers from Microsoft Research, BBC presenters of technology programs, etc., NASA scientists, and the net result was 53% women participation. I'm talking about a multi-gender technology platform. I haven't seen this figure anywhere. It was a lot of hard work, but it was well worth it, because we need that kind of contribution in order to service the global market. This is the diversity in one of our labs, the sort of a huge range of different occupations. We're famous for combining science and art. This is us with the London Symphony Orchestra in London. And in 2014, a series of luminaries from mainly Ivy League colleges and Oxford and some from Europe created a manifesto for us, unprompted, which contained this statement that you see behind me. Now, this was a challenge for me, because I thought, if this was really true, I need to prove it, and I need to create a system that will support it. The net result was a program which I ran as part of the European program. It was not a big funding, but it spun out so many startups, so many great ideas, and it was basically closing the gaps in tech transfer and enablement for new ideas quite early, and enabled me to create most of the innovation recommendations that you now see in Horizon. One of the most important results was, for instance, the speed of tech transfer and enablement to patenting, which was reduced, if you look, from first seed idea in month 5 to working prototype and patenting process 4 months later. Some men, for a change. So these are some of our alumni. Vahaken was innovator under 35 in Europe by MIT as a result of his engagement with us. 1 million follow-up funding for our neurofeedback team. Patent for primary industry, which started with experimentation in CCI, and 30 under 30 Forbes Israel, just to name a few. And the amount of partners, well over 150, but what's particularly interesting here is that industry comes to us for discovery of new markets, emerging markets, new kinds of user behaviors. And on the left, you might see sectors that you will expect in a prototyping platform, but on the right, actually, not so much. And they do actually come to us, and we have really fantastic engagement across sectors. So we are this week, in fact, in residence in a fantastic new AI Impact Lab, which is part of the University of Örebro in Sweden. Professor Amy Lutfi, who's a champion of applied AI.
We are now 25 meters
I will let you get the feel for what it feels like to be part of this.
Sweden's first nuclear reactor, now also known as the Cathedral of Science.
Many brains. I feel like brains walking around.
I'm totally amazed by this place, honestly. It's my first music tech fair.
The most important thing are the conversations that happen, the cross-pollination of different skill sets.
I can speak easily, communicate easily in this kind of environment.
So the interesting thing about MTF is that every year there's a theme, and we try to use that theme to help our development of that year.
We chose this AI lab because AI is something that is inevitable.
The first step is that AI is actually a companion, right, for humans and accompanying human existence.
There's a whole bunch of different projects happening, but what I see is a number of different specialists interacting, trying to speak to each other.
People here are like creating own stuff and creating new stuff. I would like to, that it would be really cool to like see what they do.
What I think can be interesting is the challenge, what human can already do. If it can expand our boundaries of perception, if it can challenge us to be even more creative. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to see what comes out of it.
90 high-level experts, 88 different first names. I'm rather sort of proud of that. Net result, we've kind of fallen off at the bottom, but if you can see that figure, it's 12.5 million krona, the net value of an ecosystem that we created with just one event last year in Stockholm. And so facilitating tech transfer is something that the CCI seem to be doing incredibly well. It's speeding up time to market, particularly because they operate close to emerging markets, and therefore there's emerging markets knowledge, new exploitation routes, multiplier effect, and facilitating an industry commons for deep learning. This is something that I have created as a scale-up of our methodologies because industry came to us, and this is a classic. We have a little bit of a typography issue there, I think, on the system, but hopefully you can read it. Usual bottlenecks when it comes to doing machine learning and AI application, data-driven applications. So insufficient data for training systems, interoperability problems, proprietary IP, something we're working on very, very hard to resolve, and use cases which are unpredictable, which doesn't warrant investment. So in order to solve that, we created several measures that actually tackle these challenges, and it resulted in the industry commons, which has now been integrated in DG RTD, Research and Innovation in the European Commission. There are calls, and actually a scale-up from CCI methodologies, and particularly safeguard the social and ethical dimension of AI. I now run an Industry Commons Foundation with some luminaries, some of whom had to have permission from their governments to be on it. But the cross-fertilizing between the CCI and industry sectors is really a win-win situation. So the CCI benefit, of course, from access to technologies from industry, from distribution channels and value chains, but the industry sectors, of course, benefit from the proximity to emerging markets, from breakthrough ideas and increased return on investment and reduced risk. Why? Because when you embed your capabilities with a successful and well-managed technology transfer to communities who operate already in emerging markets, if some of those take on, that means that you have taken no risks, they have taken the risk with your technology, but the successes then simply bring revenue. So if my view of disruptive innovation is it's only disruptive if it's outside of your value chain. And if we embed it in your value chain, you get to benefit from it. And of course, that allows us to go for moonshots then without the usual associated risks. And the diverse community, these are some of our community in the labs last year, the diversity of the community ensures that you can reach the widest possible markets. So we always say, we don't predict the future, we invent it. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Does it work? Yes. Wonderful, Michela. Thank you very much for not only being an inspirator, a catalyst and an innovator, but also an ambassador, I think, of innovation, and having taken us on a beautiful journey of what innovation can do with us. And what I really like particularly is this intergenerational aspect, because we talk a lot about intersectoral, interdisciplinary, but very importantly, again, it's also about Europe and coming together and people coming together. It's about the different generations actually thinking about the future together. Wonderful having you here, and I enjoy having you on my Why Culture panel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Give a big hand, please, to Michela again. Well, now is the time that we have a different format. We will do a short interview with two experts that have extensive experience in informing and working with different European institutions, but also on local level, regional level, and national level, for building new strategies around creative industries and around culture and cultural heritage. So that's the kind of a way of linking the past to the future. And for this, I call on stage, please, Elisabetta Lazzaro, who is Professor of Creative Economy at HKU and Utrecht University from the Netherlands, and Gustafsson, Professor Gustafsson, hello, great having you here, please, who is professor in heritage conservation. And you have been working together on various projects, and one of the latest ones that we will sort of talk about is in anticipation of the EIT's new strategic innovation agenda. Also, there have been some intelligence gathering, of course, what are the challenges out there regarding culture and creative industries, and how a new kick in the area would actually be able to address these various levels of challenges that you have been identifying. So maybe I think it's good to remind us, because not maybe everyone is totally aware of what creative industries could encompass, to remind us that it's already a quite heavyweight economic sector. If we look at figures, for example, it's 12 million workers that contribute to the EU economies by working in the culture and creative industries. And that, to give you an example of how it compares to other sectors, it's 2.5 times more than the automobile industry, and it's about 5 times more than the chemical industry. So it's quite significant, and not so many know about that. Also, another feature very important about the culture and creative industries is their richness and their diversity and the breadth of culture formats and culture contents that they care. So they are intrinsically driven by culture values and have a culture weight, but are also very importantly having economic value and a social value. And now in the situation that we have heard by Commissioner Navracic, this new opportunity coming up for a new kick in 2021, and with the actual really kicking off in 2022. So there's not so much time, but just on time to prepare such a kick, the stakeholders, communities. And we have asked our two experts to feed back again from their research the to-dos and the not to-dos. And I'd like to start with you, Elisabetta. Based on your research, how do you see that the KIC model, the knowledge triangle integration model, how do you see that it would be able to trigger growth and innovation in the culture and creative sector?
Well, thank you, Isabel, for your question. Does it work? I don't think so.
This one.
Thank you. Yes, okay, thank you. So, thank you for this presentation, this introduction, what is culture and the creative sector. I think on the basis of my research and practice that the KIC model applied, dedicated to the culture and creative industries is particularly suitable to support the way culture and creative industries are and operate, because it integrates, as you were mentioning, three fundamental dimensions. So research, higher education, and business. Business intended in particular in terms of entrepreneurship, so both commercial entrepreneurship, so for the money, but also social entrepreneurship. And this especially at local level. So these are key features that fit quite well the way culture and creative industries operate. Furthermore, in addition to that, as a rationale of, important rationale of the KIC model, the various KICs devoted to different sectors like manufacturing, energy, climate change, urban mobility, food, etc., digital development, are supposed also to be synergic with each other. And culture and the creative industries are particularly transversal and synergic. So think about the creative crossovers. As at my university and through collaborations at regional, national, European, but also international levels, we are venturing a series of initiatives combining this triangle already. So in partnership with other universities, with higher education, with business, and with the society. But this is not enough. We need to be more systemic. We need to build a critical mass in order to be competitive on a global scale.
Thank you. Thank you, Elisabetta. Well, on the systemic dimension, maybe to you, Krista. How do you think that pan-European consortium of sort of very different and diverse partners could work in a systemic way and actually reduce the existing fragmentation within the field? I mean, that was one of the outcomes also of different research panels that we have been associated with, that there is this fragmentation. So how could you address this through this pan-European consortium?
Thank you. No, I think this is a very interesting question, and I'd like to start to say that nowadays I don't think that anybody regard culture and creative industries and culture heritage as a cost to the society. I think that already today we heard about it as an important investment, and that also brings us to understand the return of this investment. And of course, innovation could be or is one of the most important one I think we all agree upon. When it comes to the fragmentation, I think we can regard it from a couple of different perspectives. One is between the locals that we heard very much about today, that the innovation starts at the local level, but also from different ethnic groups and different groups of people and people meet, but also on the regional, national and European level. So that is one interesting thing that we need to work with. Another thing is to link or clarify the relation between culture and creative industries and the rest of the society on these different levels. And of course also to see how the different actors within the CCI can cooperate. And I think this is of great importance, so that could also be important results from the KIC.
Thank you. And maybe one last question, because it's very sharp timing. We mentioned the preparation time. If you now would have to give a recommendation to the stakeholders that we have now here in the room, but outside, what would be your key recommendation now in order to prepare for such an opportunity as the KIC in culture and creative industry? Maybe one word from each, one recommendation each?
So my recommendation based on experience is look carefully around yourself. What is your expertise, or what are your expertise? Identify complementary and synergic expertise in other regions around Europe, research-wise, higher education-wise, business-wise, and then engage your partners and your stakeholders.
Thank you. Gustav, one last
I also think that it demands, in my experience, from many actors, that you have also to believe that you can have this contribution to the society when it comes to innovation, and also to see how it can bring other actors into it. It could be funders, financiers, but also politicians and so on. And if I say something, just one word, I will say smart specialization strategies.
Thank you so much. A big hand, short but intense, but full of advice. Thank you very much.